Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The title of the presentation is Einstein Going to Hell? And I wanted to give you just a background on why I was asking this question or thinking about this question. I was recently reading a book called Islam and Religious Pluralism by Ayatollah Murtada Montahri, and it's actually a section of a longer book that he wrote on divine justice, which is Adalat Ilahi. This was just the very end of the larger work that he did, and it was actually published as a separate book. Brought up some very interesting questions. So I wanted to kind of talk about that, and I did a little bit of exploration and research on it, and just thinking about the question. And the main question that we're talking about is religious pluralism in Islam, or does Islam accept the concept of religious pluralism? Or you could answer it or ask the question, are people that contribute positively to humanity but do not accept the religion of Islam going to hell? Which is where the title comes from. Another reason that I was interested in this subject is because I was raised as a Christian in the Christian church, and one of the reasons that I left Christianity as a young man was actually because of this question, because of the fact that, at least in the church that I was raised in, which is mainstream Lutheran evangelical Christian church in the United States, that they did believe that people that were not Christian were going to hell. And actually they even believed that other Christian, and actually some people even went even further to say Lutheran Christians were also going to hell. So it seemed very exclusionary, and it also was contradicted my personal experience with people, because obviously you meet all kinds of people with all kinds of different beliefs, and you can't imagine that the people that don't happen to share your exact same concept of God and of religion, that they're going to be burning in hell for all eternity. Of course, that's the thing. Christians believe that people who go to hell, it's eternal. So I couldn't accept that. That's one of the reasons why I left Christianity. It has to be said also that not all Christians believe this. I'm just speaking about my own personal experience. So before we get into the subject, we have to define what we mean by religious pluralism. Religious pluralism can be defined in several different ways. There is not one universally accepted definition of religious pluralism. Just about everybody that you talk to or meet has a different definition of what it means. We can say some general things about what religious pluralism means. So in general, religious pluralism includes the idea of tolerance, and it recognizes that people of other faiths have the right to exist. So inclusivism is a little bit more liberal view of pluralism, and it acknowledges that other faiths have at least some truth to them, and they have a positive influence on some members of the society. So it not only says that people of other faiths have the right to exist in society, but also that in addition to that, they actually do have positive contributions to make. And then there's the most, I would use the word liberal view of pluralism, which is that all religious paths or all religious points of view are equally valid and ultimately lead to the same result. So that would be the most pluralistic view of religious pluralism. The book that we're discussing also, it distinguishes between social pluralism and religious pluralism, because those two concepts are often confused when we talk about this subject. In the book, it uses the term social pluralism to refer to the fact that Islam is a religion of tolerance. It acknowledges the truth of other faiths. It also allows religions to actively practice their faith in Muslim societies. So that has to do with the sociology. Religious pluralism is different, the way that the book defines religious pluralism. And the way the book defines religious pluralism is the most liberal view of religious pluralism that I just talked about, which is plurality. So Islam does reject the idea that all religious paths are equally valid and are expressions of the same truth. The book gives lots of proofs of this. It's not possible that all religions are equally valid because they contradict each other. So if you have two things that contradict each other, then one of them must be true, one of them must be false, or they both must be false. But they can't both be true because they're contradictory. That's just common sense. The main ayat of Quran that is discussed in the book is ayat 3, which is Surat Al Imran, ayat 85. He who desires a religion other than Islam, never will it be accepted of him, and in the hereafter he will be among the losers. On the other hand, there's other verses in the Quran that give a different view of the question of the issue of Islam and religious pluralism. You have Surah 2, Ayah 62. You also have Surah 5, Ayah 69. And you have Surah 21, Ayah 94. All of these surahs and the ayahs in the Quran, they basically tell you that people who are righteous, whether they follow the Jewish scriptures, whether they follow the teachings of Nabi Isa, Jesus, whether they follow the teachings of Nabi Musa, which is Moses, or Nabi Ibrahim, which is Abraham, or other prophets of God, and they follow basically leaders that were legitimately divinely inspired. If those people are good people and sincere people, that those people, there's no reason, God won't waste their reward. There's no reason that they should be fearful or grieve or things like that. The Quran clearly says that other people other than Muslims certainly will be in heaven and certainly will have the opportunity to go to heaven. But of course it puts a criteria on that those people are sincere and that they follow a message that is legitimately divinely inspired. And of course, as most people who are listening to this know, in Islam we believe there was 124,000 prophets that came to humanity, so by no means was the Prophet Muhammad the only prophet that Muslims accept. They accept all of the prophets that are, and so the people that follow those revelations of prophets, but of course all those prophets came before the time of the Prophet Muhammad. So if those people, the people who followed the legitimate prophets before the time of the Prophet Muhammad, certainly those people will go to heaven, right? And they're righteous. It would seem on the face of it that the verses contradict each other. So it would seem that the message of the Surah 3, Ayah 85 would contradict the others that we discussed. But of course, that's not true. And in the book, it goes into a lot of detail on this about why those verses don't contradict each other. I'm going to encourage people to read the book, and I'm not going to go into all of the arguments or all the proofs that he puts forward, but basically suffices to say that the verses don't contradict each other, and that the word Islam, of course, in the Quran is used in different ways. Sometimes the word Islam is used to refer to the followers of the Prophet Muhammad, and sometimes the word Islam is used to talk about people who follow the concept of Islam, which is generally to submit to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or to submit themselves to the will of God. So it's used both in the general and the specific case within the Quran, and also within this verse. And the book goes into more detail about that. But our time is short. We don't have a lot of time for the presentation, so we want to move a little bit quicker. But I encourage people to read the book and to see why those verses don't contradict each other. But the main discussion of the book, or kind of so that's all kind of the introduction to the topic, but the main subject of the actual book itself and the main discussion of the book has to do with the value of the good deeds of those people who are non-believers. Essentially people that either they're only marginally religious, so maybe they do profess a religion but they don't really take it seriously and they don't really follow it, or people that explicitly have no religion or don't believe in God, etc., etc. So what is the question? The main question of the book is that, a lot of those people, despite the fact that religion is not a very important part of their life, or a marginally important part, they do a lot of good works and good deeds in the society, right? And this goes back kind of to the title of the thing, which is about Einstein. We don't know a whole lot about what Einstein believed or about his religion. He didn't talk about it extensively. We have a vague idea that he did believe in God and believed in the concept of God, but we don't know much more than that. From what I know and from what I've read, he doesn't seem to be an extremely religious person by any means. However, of course, his ideas and the ideas of lots of other people that, religion certainly wasn't front and center of their life, but they made a lot of positive contributions to society. So what is the value of their works, essentially, and are those people eligible to go to heaven or not, is the main question, again, that people ask quite frequently of Muslims, right? they're basically asking you to judge that person on whether they're going to heaven or hell is essentially what they're asking for, which is, of course, ridiculous request, just in my opinion, but people ask it. So he talks about two different views on this topic of the value of the good deeds of people without faith. One of the camps or one of the views is the one that's usually held by either people that are non-religious or marginally religious. And basically this view is that it's what you do that matters. It's not what you believe or what you claim to believe. It's your actions that matter. Those people cite evidence from the Quran. Basically, I'm not going to quote all of the verses that he quotes in the book, but there's lots of verses that, to the effect that anybody who does good, that the good will be rewarded, and the effect of that good will be something positive for that person. And it's a general statement, so it doesn't exclude non-Muslims, or it doesn't exclude anybody from that. So that's one view. The other view is that the only thing that matters is correct belief and correct faith. This is generally a religious extremist view. It's not something that I guess the average Muslim, they don't explicitly have this view. Sometimes you'll hear statements from just your average Muslim or your average religious person that are kind of tinged with this, but it's generally the people that hold it firmly are the religious extremists. The other common view is that it's only faith that matters, and that if you have the correct faith, or if you profess to have the correct religion, that you'll be saved, and if you don't, then you won't. And usually these people believe that it's really small group of people basically that believe exactly like them, that those people are the only ones that are going to go to heaven. Everybody else will go to hell. They believe that they're among a few special elite that have been chosen for heaven. And this is the corollary to the view of the liberal or non-religious people, that all that matters is works. These people say no, all that matters is faith. In the book, it talks about a third way, or a third view, which is the correct view, in my opinion and the opinion of the author. And it talks about basically what is the Holy Quran's position on this subject. In the book, it goes into a lot of detail about this, but again, just to kind of summarize what the book says. Basically, the most important point in this argument, basically the Quranic view of the subject, has to do with the question of niyyah, or with intention. There's much more evidence for this view than for any other view, both in the Quran and Hadith, that what matters in regards to the acceptability of the actions of people before in the eyes of God is their niyyah, or their intention in performing the action. If you have a correct and if you have a good intention in performing the action, then it will be accepted, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept that action and will count it as a good deed for you. And obviously, if you have enough good deeds, if you meet the basic criteria of having more good deeds than bad deeds, then you would go to heaven. Basically, your account balance would be positive for good deeds, and then you would go to heaven. But whether those deeds are counted as good deeds or not depends on your intention, not on the actual action. And there's a lot of evidence for this. Just to briefly talk about two hadiths that demonstrate this precisely. There's the two that are quoted in the book, and we'll give the full reference in the presentation, but basically one of them is that no deed is accepted without an intention, which is a hadith from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And another hadith from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is that the value of actions is in their intention, and a man shall only get that which he intended. So whoever migrated for the sake of God and his messenger, his migration is towards God and his messenger, and whoever migrated for the sake of worldly wealth, or a woman he wished to marry, his migration is toward that thing. So basically that's the overall message. Is there's a verse in the Quran also, the man gets nothing other than what he strives for, and there's many other verses and hadiths that basically talk about this, that whatever you're aiming for, whatever your intention is, whatever you're trying to get, ultimately that's what you'll get. If you're doing an action for the sake of making money, or if you're performing an action regardless of what people think you're doing it for, but if your actual intention is something else other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you will get that thing. Obviously, if you work hard enough, etc., you will get that thing that you're trying to get. But it doesn't mean that you're going to get double credit for that. In other words, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you that thing and will also give you a good deed, just like someone who performed the good deed for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So The short answer to the question, again, now that we get to the question of is Einstein going to hell, the answer is we don't know. Nor do we know most all non-Muslims or people, even people who are atheists or people who are from other religions. You can make it as broad as you want. We ultimately don't have any idea most of the time whether a person is going to heaven or hell or not. We don't know what our ultimate destination is or not, because we can't see the intentions or know the intentions of other people. We really have no idea what the reason is, what the person's motivation is for doing something. Whether they say it or they don't say it, we have the same problem, because of course there's many people in the religion of Islam that claim that what they're doing is for the sake of God, and there's lots of crazy wacko Wahhabi Salafi people that claim, oh, we're doing this for the sake of God, we're killing innocent people for the sake of God, or people. There's been lots of rulers, tyrants throughout history, Harun al-Rashid, other people like that, who have said, we're killing our enemies for the sake of God because they're enemies of God and whatever, and all kinds of statements that people have made that trying to convince people that they're doing something for a good reason and for a good intention. And of course, we don't actually know the reason that person is. We can only judge people's actions based on the action itself. We don't know the intention. There's lots of people that have done great works for humanity, and humanity's benefited immensely. Einstein, Pasteur, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla, etc., and the list goes on and on and on, who've made these great inventions and people have benefited from them. But if the person was only doing it to make money or as a business or for self-glory or some other reason, then of course God's not going to reward that person not going to put that person in heaven, because the person didn't do it for the sake of God. He did it for fame or for money, so God gave them those things. But he's not going to also give them heaven for that case. On the other hand, there's lots of people that you've never heard of and I've never heard of that have worked all their life sincerely, piously for the sake of God, regardless of what religion they are or what religion they claim. We've never heard of them, probably because the person never did it for the intention of seeking fame or fortune or any of those. They did it purely for the sake of God. And inshallah, all of those people will be in heaven. So, the answer is we don't know. We don't know. The other main point in focusing on intention or in focusing on niyyah in this question is because since we can't know the intention of other people, but one thing we can know is our own intention in doing something. So one of the reasons for the Quran to concentrate so much on niyyah or intention is so that we examine our own intentions and see whether our own actions are for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or for the sake of something else, and then we know what we can expect from those actions. So just to end the discussion, one of my favorite parts of the book was actually the story of Bahlool's mosque, and it's a really great story. Bahlool, in case people don't know, he was a famous companion of Imam Ja'far Sadiq al-Islam. He was a companion of many of the Imams. I believe that he actually lived until the time of Imam Hassan al-Askari al-Islam. The story goes that Harun al-Rashid, who was a tyrant, wanted to appoint him as a judge in his court, and rather than serve a tyrannical ruler, he pretended to be crazy to avoid working for him. So a lot of people in his society at the time believed that he was insane. He was known as Bahlool Majnoon. He wasn't. He was doing it to avoid working for an unjust ruler. Bahlool saw a group of men building a masjid, and he asked them, why are you building this? They answered, we are building it for the sake of God. We are building it fi sabilillah, right? So Bahlool had a stone engraved with the words Bahlool's mosque and put it above the door. The next day when the men building the mosque came back and they saw the stone above the door to the mosque, they attacked Bahlool, and they were very angry at him, yelling at him, hitting him. And he asked them why they were so angry. And they said, because you're trying to take credit for our work. You're trying to tell people that it's your mosque, that you built it, but you know that we built it. Obviously that's not fair. Bahlool's reply, which is the most interesting part of the story, he said, when I asked you why you built the mosque, you said that you're building it for the sake of God. Let's suppose that the people mistakenly think that I built the mosque, but God wouldn't make that mistake, right? So in other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows who built the mosque. Why do you care if the people think that it's my mosque? So I just thought that was a great story, and it was a great way of demonstrating the point that rather than questioning or thinking about the question of whether other people are going to go to hell or judging them, figure that question out or preoccupying our mind with that question, what we should be doing is focusing on our own intention and the purity of our own niyyah and our own intention in our action. Assalamu alaikum.